Hey guys, what's up? Mr. Castro here. I hope everybody's having a great summer. Just wanted to touch base with you guys, kind of give you guys a little bit of an update in terms of the essay stuff. Hopefully a lot of you are finishing your stuff using things like Google Docs and then again using Edmodo. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to put together a little bit of a presentation for you guys, and again just a reminder that we are going to be meeting next week at school, Thursday and on Friday from 8 to 12. Friday we should probably be done roughly around 10:30. But yeah, I just want to remind you guys of those things. And so one of the things I wanted to do was put together a little bit of a presentation to help you guys in terms of what my expectations are of the essay. One of the things that you guys should really try to focus on too is using the outline that I gave you guys, that I posted on Edmodo. That is the outline format that we are going to be using. And again, on that format, it shows a 5-paragraph essay. And one of the things that we're going to understand really quickly is that it doesn't always have to be a 5-paragraph essay. We really want to call it a multi-paragraph essay. But for the sake of this particular essay, we are going to focus on that. So one of the things that we really want to take a look at is the essay. The question that it asks is about the development. The key word there is development, right? So one of the things that you have to ask yourselves is, what does the word development mean? Okay, so that's kind of important, right? To understand is what is the how did the 13 colonies develop? So this word is really important. So one of the things that you want to make sure that you kind of address, right, when talking about the colonies is understanding that if we're talking about the colonies, we're talking roughly the settlement of Virginia, which is in 1607, to about 1733. But really, you can even make the argument that we want to go all the way to the beginnings of the French and Indian War, so 1607 to 1754, right? And so what you want to do is you want to address how all 13 colonies developed. Now, one of the things that I always urge students to do is to want to focus on pre-writing. And so one of the things that you guys want to make sure that you do, right, is you want to do some pre-writing. One of my recommendations always with the pre-writing is that you guys try to figure out what the topic is. So I'm going to tell you in this case what the topic is. The question deals with the development of the 13 colonies, but that's not the topic. The topic itself is the 13 colonies. So one of the things that I recommend that you guys do always is write down the topic as the very first thing that you do. So in this case, with the 13 colonies, my recommendation is that you sit there and you brainstorm for a couple of minutes. Everything that you learned up to this point, whether it be from the 5 chapters. Some of you just sent me emails right now, just recently, saying, what should we focus on? Where do we get our information from? Well, you just hopefully read 5 chapters on the development of the 13 colonies. Hopefully you've read some of the Zinn stuff, right? Hopefully you've read some of the primary sources. Hopefully you've read some of the Lowen stuff, right? There's information in there. So what you want to do is you want to brainstorm some of the stuff that you've learned, right? So, for example, throwing down words like Virginia, right? Throwing things down like Lord Baltimore, right? Throwing things down like House of Burgesses. And again, I'm just writing down 3. But my point is that you want to write down maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes, as many things down on a piece of paper as you possibly can. Guys, this is not going to be turned into me. You're not giving me this. This is just so that you can alleviate in your head the constipation, right, of all of the information that's hopefully in your head, and then just write it down so that you can begin to kind of figure out what it is that you want to use for your essay. So once we move from this to the next piece, one of the things that you think about the idea of, okay, well, how am I going to organize this essay? So the essay is asking you about the development of the 13 colonies, right? And it's saying economically, socially, politically, and so it also says north, middle, and south. So one of the things that you need to think about is, okay, well, how can I organize this? And so one of the things that you can do, and I am a firm believer that when you're writing an essay that deals with things like economics and social and political, the reason I did it the way that I did it is because I am a firm believer that one of the things that you need to focus on first, right, is the idea of economics. So for me, economics is very key. So one of the things that you have to ask yourselves, right, is what does economics mean? Economics is the study of how we get the things that we want and need, okay? So one of the things to think about, for example, right, is that the very first economic system was nomadic hunters and gatherers. So one of the things that you should think about, and this obviously this is not going to go in your essay. I'm trying to explain to you guys the thought process here. So the very first economic system, how we acquired the things that we wanted and needed, was by moving and hunting and gathering. So men were the hunters and women were the gatherers. And one of the things that we'll talk about when we meet next week is what that means in sex, in terms of like sex and gender, and the difference between the two, and the development of gender roles. And so one of the things that I really want you to think about, right, is as you move forward, that eventually when farming was discovered, right, it's that hunter and gathering economies led to, right, agricultural economies, right? So agricultural economies. And so one of the things that you really want to think about, right, is, and again, this is not going to go in your essay, I just want you to see my thinking, is that we went from hunter and gatherer economy, to an agricultural economy. Now, one of the things that I really want you to see too is that economics leads to social organization. So what does social mean, right? So social means people, right? In this case, social organization. So when you think about hunters and gatherers, right, these hunters and gatherers are moving, so you couldn't have a lot of people. So you have to think, okay, well, how did they organize? What did it look like? What were the roles of women? What were the roles of men, right? So realistically, the simplest way to kind of put it is that they organize in terms of tribes. And so again, within that, you can talk about the size of the tribes, and you can talk about like women and what they did versus men, right? So again, what did society look like? And society is going to be based on the economy. As you move forward, right, and people were able to settle down, these tribes became villages, which eventually became cities, right? Well, what does that mean? That means that society became more complex, okay? So you have people doing different things, artisans, right? And people not just farming, but doing other things. So society becomes complex. You begin to see priests and everything else begin to take place. Now, as this happens, you also have to have decision making, and that's where we start talking about politics. So politics, right, is essentially the governing piece, how people govern themselves. Well, in a hunter-gatherer society, because there were only a few people, it made it a lot easier for just maybe one person, right? So in a hunter-gatherer society, the political system is basically the chief, okay? Now, as you move forward into a village or a city, you begin to see the development of government, okay, or political institutions, right? So different governments begin to take place depending on what the need was. So what does this all mean in the long scheme of things, right? Well, think about it, okay? One of the things that you have to understand is when it comes to economics, you have to ask yourself the question, well, why are there different economies, right? Really, it all depends on what is being offered. So one of the things that you guys should think about, as I look at the regions, north, middle, and south, right? Why are they divided into north, middle, and south, right? It's not like someone said, we are going to be the north or we are going to be the south, right? No, what ends up happening, right, is that we study them this way in terms of the northern region, the southern region, the middle region, right? But a lot of it has to do with the economic systems, right? So it also has to do with this very important word. And so one of the things that I really want you guys to think about in terms of your essays is how the geography determined the economy. Okay? So for example, as you think about the north, okay, you really think about, okay, the geography, right? The climate, okay? The geography, the climate. And so what type of geo, right, did the north have, which means what type of economy? And again, from economics, we go to social, we go to political. So the same thing applies to the middle and the south. One of the things that I messed up on the essay is what I should have done was I should have changed it to north, south, and middle, but I didn't because I wanted you guys to see it as north, middle, south. But the reason I say that now is because one of the things I hope that you guys begin to realize is that the middle colonies are really just sort of a makeup of both the north and the south in most cases, depending on where they were relative to the northern or southern colonies. But doesn't it make more sense that if you're addressing an essay, that if you're going to say the northern colonies look like this, that the next thing would be to say, well, the southern colonies look like this, And the reason I say that is because if the third thing you bring up is the middle colonies, well, wouldn't it make sense that if you're going to say the middle colonies sort of had an economic system like the North and the South, that if you mention that wouldn't it make sense to mention the middle colonies first, or excuse me, the southern colonies first? So for the sake of argument, right, we're going to go south. And we're going to say, okay, well, what type of geography did the South offer? Which meant what type of economic system did it offer? Which meant what type of social system? Which meant what type of political system? Well, the same thing for the middle, right? So for the middle colonies, right? We're going to say, well, what type of geography did they offer, right? And obviously, they were the most diverse. Well, what type of, economic system? And again, it all really depended on which one it was. So, basically, there are a few ways to write this, okay? Here is one way that you can do it. So one way that you can do it is you can organize your body paragraphs, right? In terms of north, okay? In terms of south, in terms of middle. So as you do this, okay, one of the things that you want to think about, right, is you want to say, okay, well, if I'm going to organize it this way, then the very first thing that you want to talk about with the north is you want to try to talk about the economy of the north, okay? And so then what that means is that the very next thing that you want to talk about is the social makeup of the North, which means that the very next thing that you want to talk about is the political system of the North. So guess what that means? That you want to do the same thing for the South, and you want to do the same thing here, and you want to do the same thing here, which again means that for the middle, you need to say, well, about the diversity of the economy, and what does that mean for the diversity of society, right? And what does it mean about the politics of the middle colonies? Now, if you decide to organize it this way, what does that mean for your thesis statement, right? So your thesis statement would be, right, about the colonies developing into 3 regions, northern, southern, and middle, each with their own distinct economic, social, and political systems. That's your thesis statement, okay? Now, what that means is that in each of these, you need to provide evidence, right? So, for example, if you're talking about the northern colonies, right, you can't just say they were rocky. You need to mention specific, okay, examples, okay? You need to mention specific examples. So in Massachusetts, blah, 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 right? In Connecticut, blah, 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 right? So the question is, okay, well, Mr. Kester, where do we find this, right? We can just read all this stuff. So then same thing applies here, right? You need to give specific examples about society. So you can't just say, you know, the Northerners, because they came in groups and they settled and they had to be close together because of the economy, they were a close-knit group. No, you need to mention what that means, right? They came as Puritans, right? They had separated from the English church. You need to give clear examples. Okay, well, what does that mean politically? Again, give clear examples. Same thing for the South, right? So again, if you say, you know, the southern colonies were agrarian societies, right? Or colonies. You need to mention, right, in Virginia, right, they focused on tobacco growing, right, whereas the Carolinas focused on rice and indigo. Well, what does that mean in terms of society? Well, in terms of society, what it meant was that you had a plantation culture, right, with a few really rich people. Again, you need to mention specific examples. So what does that mean, right? That means politically, right, because the colonies were so spread apart, they had to organize some sort of representative government. And a great example of what the southern governments look like in the different colonies would be the House of Burgesses in Virginia as an example, right? So again, you do the same thing for the middle colonies, okay? Now, that is one way of organizing the essay. The other way that you can organize, you could say economic, social, and political. So guess what that means? That means that you would go, okay, well now, as my first example, I need to say, well, the economy of the North looked like this, right? So what does that mean for the rest of it, right? Oh, well, that means I need to say, well, the economy of the South looked like this and compare it to the North. And that means that I need to explain how the economy of the middle colonies developed this way as opposed to the southern and northern colonies, right? So guess what that means? That means that you need to say the society of the North developed this way. Well, that means I need to say that the society of the South developed this way, and the society of the middle developed this way, right? And that the political system of the North developed this way, and that the social part of the political part of the South developed this way, right? And then the same for the middle colonies. And again, you want to give examples, right, of these things. Okay, so clear, concrete examples, guys. I need to be able to look these things up. Like, you can't just say, there was a governor. Well, what was the governor's name, right? You need to give a specific examples. You can't just say in the northern colonies, right? Well, give an example, right? In Massachusetts, right? In the middle colonies were very diverse socially, right? Well, give me an example. Say in New York, this is what it was like. So again, hopefully this gives you a little bit of a rough draft in terms of what your thinking should be. In terms of the introduction and in terms of the conclusion, right, one of the things that you really want to think about, right, in terms of the introduction is so again, you know in this case that the 13 colonies is the topic. Well, that means that it's implied that the person already knows, but they don't know, whoever's reading. So you need to tell people, right, you need to answer in your introduction before you get to your thesis a few things, right? So like things like, where did these people come from, right? Why did they come, okay? Who were they, right? So things like this need to be answered in the intro before you get to the thesis, okay? Now, in this case of your essay, it needs to do two things, and it should always do these two things for all essays. The very first thing that it should do is it should always restate your focus, right? In this case, your focus is the 13 colonies of development, right? But the second thing that it should do is it should raise a new question. Okay? So it should raise a new question. And so in this case, right, the next unit is about the American Revolution. So you have to ask the reader, right, with 13 colonies, with 3 regions, right, how was this going to eventually become America? So again, these were British colonies, right? So something had to have happened, right, with the relationship. And so maybe that's something that you can raise in your conclusion, is the relationship that's going to develop between the colonies and its mother country, okay? So again, I'm going to leave you with this right now. If any of you have questions, obviously you can hit me up. Again, if you've lost the information, you can look it up on Edmodo. Again, just a reminder that next Thursday and Friday we are meeting from 8 to 12. Please do not be late. If you have not contacted me about not being able to be there, you need to do so as soon as possible, with a legitimate reason as to why you can't come. One of the things that you want to do, and I expect everybody to have, and I'm giving you plenty of time right now, it's Thursday, we're not meeting for 7 days, is I expect everyone to have at least a rough draft of their essay, okay? So you need to come prepared with a rough draft of the essay. It doesn't have to be perfect, but based on the information I just gave you, I expect something pretty decent. So again, if you have any questions, guys, please feel free to let me know. Okay? Cheers.